In this tutorial, I'm going to review how to use biological diagram templates for Adobe Illustrator. After downloading the files, you will see that there are 3 file types. There are 2 Adobe Illustrator AI files, one for color, one for grayscale. There is a compressed zip file that contains all the individual SVG vector files, and there is a PowerPoint file. Let's start by opening the AI color file. With the file open, you will want to zoom out to see all of the 270 individual illustrations in the file, and you can do this by going to the lower left-hand corner zoom in, zoom out via percentage screen and use 8.33%, and then use the hand tool by pressing the space bar and clicking and dragging all of the artboards into the space. And you can expand the window to fill the screen using this green upper left button. And you can now see that we have all of the individual artboards visible, and these correspond to artboards in this right panel, where every single artboard, if you select the artboard tool, corresponds to the label, and this relates to the cell types and the types of illustrations in each of these artboards in this panel on the right. So there are over 270 individual illustrations that we're going to review today in pretty quick review. And what I want to also point out is if you aren't seeing this artboard tab in your settings, you may need to go to Window, Workspace, and Web to reset your your layout to web style, and that will show the artboards and properties and layers, which are 3 very important tabs you need to work within this document. So with the selection tool selected, I want to click on figure templates and use Command plus to zoom in, and that's Command plus minus, Control plus minus if you're on a Windows operating system. I'm going to use the space bar to get the hand tool to move myself over and show you the artboard tool on these 2 artboards. So the first artboard is a 2-column figure template, and this is 180 millimeters wide, which is close to almost every maximum width for 2-column figure for a scientific publication. You should double check this for your own journal requirements. Some are slightly less, like 176 millimeters, but keep in mind, the whole point here is that you have a 1-column width figure and a 2-column width figure already ready to go with some sample text in each of these that you can then ungroup and use to start to create your own figure or graphical abstract and pull in these elements. And what I would recommend is that you do not edit this template file. If you're going to start to create a figure or an illustration, I do recommend that you go ahead and File, New, have your template up side by side, have an RGB web new file that then you can take this 2-column artboard, use Command C or Control C on a Windows, zoom out, paste, and you can see that compared to that web doc, that the very large file, if you really want to format properly for scientific figures, you're going to want to use a much smaller dimension. So I'll delete this artboard just so that this can then be our example of how we might pull in and use this template without editing things directly on the template. And so those are the first 2 templates you see here, and the rest of the files in this document are really much more applicable to drawing, and we'll start next with the lines and arrows. So I'm going to zoom in to the lines and arrows, use the hand tool with the space bar to move over and show you that I have a bunch of lines already formatted with 1 stroke width. These can be adjusted to any width, a thinner width if you'd like. You can add vector points or create your own vector points using this pen tool. But the whole point of this file is that I've created these to save you time. So for example, if you wanted to have a statistical significance bar with already perfectly formatted 4 vector points, so A, selection tool to see these vector points. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. I can select these points move them around with my arrow keys, select this point, hold shift, move it down with my arrow key, and again, copy, paste. This could then be pulled into this other file if I were making a graph that needed a statistical significance bar. That's how this can be used. So again, I'm just trying to save you time by including these illustrations. Again, I don't recommend editing them directly in this file. This is the template file. But if you do accidentally, move or shift all of your original files, know that you were sent a copy of this original file in your email that you provided. So you will always have your backup template to re-download if needed. But let's keep cruising. So we have examples of multiple different types of lines with dotted lines. We have inhibitor lines, arrow lines. Again, this is just as if you aren't good at using the pen tool yet, this can circumvent some of those issues that you have. And if you're don't know how to make these unique arrow shapes, they're already in here for you to copy and paste and use in your own designs. And so let's look at the next row. The lines are fairly simple, but this next section, if I zoom out, Command minus again, Control if you're on a Windows, are the cell types. And if you look at the artboards, click on the artboard tool, starting with artboard 24, you can see that they have some names, some that are maybe more specific, like this fibroblast, where if I click on this artboard, it'll zoom right in, right? That's a fibroblast shape that's commonly considered this shape for scientific illustration purposes. But a lot of them I've also just labeled a round cell. So don't necessarily rely on this for specific cell types. This is used as a template where you can adjust everything about these. Pardon me, I zoomed out to the wrong thing. You can adjust every single part of these cellular shapes and make them what you want on your own. Remember, there are some labeled like this basophil, there are some labeled like these muscle cells, but these are all completely editable, adjustable, and up to you how you use them, whether you want to change their color or their shape, because you have the raw Adobe Illustrator file. And again, these can be adjusted in other vector tools like Affinity Designer in this exact same way. These artboards will register if you open the Adobe Illustrator file in Affinity Designer. And again, you can start to copy paste. Let's say you wanted to show myelin and you have this, you copy it, paste, you can put it in your file here. You can be resizing this. It won't lose its any of its resolution because it's a vector file. You can adjust whether the strokes and FX scale. And again, just make your own illustration or make your own figure using these templated designs. If I zoom out, you'll see that there are a lot of different cell types, viruses, bacteria, and I tried to cover almost the most commonly used ones that I use in my professional illustrations. Next up in this file are simple signaling designs. And I find that sometimes people struggle with gradients on their signaling molecules, which is why I provided pre-gradient set designs so that you can, even if you don't like this color, you can still have a shape that already has the gradient in place for you to edit those color gradients yourself. And again, this is just a large array of options for you to use and adjust. If you wanted to use these signaling molecules, let's say you wanted to pull in something like this signaling molecule, but you really wanted to show something unique about this lower half. Let's say it has to be bigger or it has to be expanding a lipid membrane. Again, you can start to adjust any of these points to be whatever you want them to be. It can be as simple as selecting individual points with the direct selection tool to make things wider, to make things shorter. Again, the whole point of this file is that I'm trying to save you time by giving you everything you need to create your own customized illustrations instead of having to rely on templates that you can't fully edit or control yourself. So again, we have a large amount of these pre-gradient set files. And remember, you can change their color, and I'll give an example of how to do that using the color palette at the very end of this artboard tour. And if I zoom back out, I want to show you that the next section we have is some of these more complex signaling designs and biological designs. So often when you're doing some sort of illustration about your methods, you may want to have more complex things like this apoptosome or mitochondria. So I've included a lot of these basic designs as well as some very complex designs related to cell cancer, related to blood vessel interactions, histone modifications. So there really is an expansive library of options that are fully editable for you to use in your own designs. And I've even included two sort of large examples where I've used some of these designs that you've seen and shown you how you can arrange some of these exact pieces to create your own cellular or signaling representations. The next section that I have included in this template is I consider very important. I use these all the time. They're cell backgrounds, and they're large because if I wanted to be showing some sort of signaling pathway or cellular mechanism, one of the things I found most of my students struggle with are selecting relevant colors that are not too intimidating. So you can even see here, there are these color palettes for sort of more muted and brighter cell backgrounds that you can use to fill in for your research. So whether you're trying to have a full cellular mechanism, or if we zoom in here, if you're just trying to show some interaction from a signaling membrane, you can take these, copy, bring them over to your figure, resize them holding Shift, and begin to play with moving these. Again, you have to know a little bit about Adobe Illustrator, ordering of things in layers, and I have training online courses if you're new to this, if you're not sure how to move this, and I've also included PowerPoint file with this that can help you begin to learn how to move and illustrate with these items without even using Adobe Illustrator at all. If you struggle with Adobe Illustrator, there are ways to use what I've provided for you in PowerPoint as you get to know how to use Illustrator as a tool. And again, what I'm just showing you are examples. You can start to put together your own signaling pathway figures with this. I want to lock this background, use let this span to the lipid membrane. And again, the whole point of this is things like BioRender do give you the ability to move stuff around, but not to truly customize it. And that's the point. This is fully customizable to whatever you want to create for your designs. So again, the backgrounds I find very helpful. I use them all the time for my own designs. It's just helpful to have them all set out in front of you. And one more point I want to make about these background designs before I go is that I even have some of these already formatted with the nucleus, with the endoplasmic reticulum, with the nuclear pores, and with blood vessels, so with exosomes. So just keep in mind there's already a lot here for you to play with if you're new to the designs or you're not quite good at creating your own designs yet. And the lipid membrane, which I'll get to in just a minute, is actually using what we call a vector brush in Adobe Illustrator. So if you're not familiar with a vector brush, I just briefly want to show you that if I click and ungroup this illustration, this top part is actually made up of a brush using a stroke. So if this is just a line with a brush applied, and if I increase the stroke width to something like 1, you'll see that you can change the size relative to this length of this stroke. And you can even use this to create unique shapes. So I just took that pen tool out. I'm going to draw a shape. I'm going to make it just be the stroke, I'm going to use my anchor point tool, Shift C, to add some curves to this line that I've just created. I'm just trying to show you some customization options if you're not familiar with them. Excuse me, let's see. V to get out, Command Shift C to get this tool, hold Shift to get a nice even line. And if I go here and I select this brush, you can see that it doesn't have to be a straight line. It can be any shape you want. And in this template, I've included, if you look down below, a set of these vector pattern brushes that are the most commonly used ones that include DNA in multiple different formats, lipid bilayers in multiple different formats, and even cell layers that are epithelial cell layers. And this might take a little bit more advanced training, but I figured I would include it in here anyway, where you can adjust the colors. So I've provided a wide array of colors that are probably the only colors you'll ever need. But let's say you wanted to adjust this DNA strand to match a very specific color of your design. So let's say you wanted to use this exact DNA style, but you wanted it to be green to match your current design. Well, this template on the left is the sort of puzzle piece that is used as the repeated element. So if I wanted to create a brand new brush with a green color, and this is where the color palettes come in. Let's say I want that green color. I can press I for my eyedropper tool, pull in that green color that I know I was already using in this design. And you can see it matches very well. And that's because all of the colors that I'm using are actually using this color template. And that's what's you even just saw me use it. It's very helpful to have this color template even included next to your draft design, because these colors might be used again and again to adjust whether you want that to be a dark green that matches the overall color design, a lighter green that still matches this overall green color design, or any of these colors that you choose. And again, you can adjust this to be whatever you want it to be by clicking on your color palette in Adobe Illustrator. But I do feel like color design is one of the things my students struggle with most. So I've provided these templates for you where you can use the eyedropper tool, I, to select and then create whatever you want. So I diverged a little bit into the color palette, but I think that's okay, because what I want to show you is, as I've made this green design, as I said before, this is the puzzle piece that then becomes the new brush. And if I want to have a line, so if I take this pen tool and create, holding Shift, a new line, it doesn't matter what color it is, but I want it to be this DNA strand in this color, what I can do is I can take this puzzle piece, I can add a brush by clicking this plus new brush sign. I want a pattern brush, okay. I want my corners to be auto in between on that turn and auto in between on this turn. It won't really matter for a straight line, but I like to have that setting no matter what. I'll call it my green DNA. And I can then click on this line and apply this exact pattern repeated, change the stroke because I want this to have more turns in this single line. So 0.5 width. And there, for my illustration, I've used this puzzle piece to create my own DNA brush that didn't even rely on the colors I've pre-selected for you in this color file. So again, that's the beauty of this template file. You can customize and create all sorts of your own designs and start to learn to use Illustrator without having to know and be extremely competent at creating all of these complex shapes yourself. Now, I already showed you a bit about these color templates and how they work, but I want to do a deeper dive just to show you there's a bright color selection, a dark color selection, and the background color section, so really faint. And what I want to show you is that I can use these color templates. So let's say I copy this artboard using Command C. If I move myself back up, let's say I wanted, I want to move this artboard up here, which I sometimes do, or just move a copy of the templates up here, because how these templates are most useful is, let's say I know I want to do a cancer cell illustration. So I'm going to have some normal cells, but I'm going to have some funky cells, but I don't want my cancer cells to be yellow. I want them to be red. So what I might do is I want them to be red. So I take this as my cancer cell. Let's zoom into it, ungroup it, and change this gradient fill using my eye to this red medium gradient fill. Change the nucleus to then be a brighter red just by using the eye tool. So that's why there's gradient with stroke templates that you can really use to change this cell and this nucleus shape to any color you want. If you really wanted to, you could have both have gradients. You know, it's up to you how you design your own final results. But it's really helpful to have these bright, dark, and cell background color templates to quickly make decisions about the color design. Let's say I wanted there to be red cancer cells, and then I had epithelial cells that were going to be a purple color. I'm just going to pull this cell again. You shouldn't be editing directly on this file. I do recommend you pull stuff over or create a copy, just so you don't, have to re-download this original biological template color file. But I'm going to ungroup and just show you again the power of these color templates. So I selected it. This outline, this main cell color is an orange, a dull orange, and I'm going to make this instead a nice light blue by clicking the eye tool, using eye, or selecting the eyedropper tool in your panel and clicking on the object, clicking eye, or clicking on the eyedropper tool and choosing the corresponding colors that make sense. So it's fully customizable and helpful to know why these squares are in here. And keep in mind, I've chosen these colors, but you do not have to use these colors by any means. I've also put here some basically blank squares so that if you want to be playing with a set of colors that you've pulled from the internet or that you've adjusted yourself just by using this color palette select color tool, and you want to keep track and create your own unique color palettes, I've even left some options here for you to play. Okay, so that is enough about the color palette. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to now review a little known trick that Adobe Illustrator has, which is there are glyph and text symbols from their text options. And I'll zoom in first just at the text and glyph to get me in the right place. All of these symbols and specific bullet point dots, because again, you can't type a bullet point in Adobe Illustrator. You could be using these text symbols to draw things even like a plant. So this illustration is fully free for you to use from Adobe Illustrator. Let's say you're mapping out a cellular pathway of plants. This symbol can be expanded. It's a text symbol. You can expand it and start to treat it exactly like a regular vector file. So if I use ungroup, Command-Shift-G, Control if you're on a PC, I can change these colors. I can even edit the individual vector points. And what I want to point out is that this is very powerful. And I'll show you where they exist originally, but I'm going to change the color just to match the color design of my current dock a little better, right? So this green matches this green. You can, make it a specific leaf shape. You can add color to this. And in the glyph section, so I pulled this out, and again, there's all these other shapes. I just showed a small selection of what's available. What you need to be aware is that all of these symbols came from me going to character and choosing the emoji 1 as my character. So if I click on this and I open it and I double click on fonts emoji 1, this is where you're going to see all of the available. You can have every nationality, you can have people symbols. This can really accelerate your design if you're using specific things like a book or a representation of a book. And in order to insert something like this book, you're going to want to either select a current glyph emoji 1 and just replace it. So this, if I hover, can be replaced with the book. Or you can also have your type tool open, click, go find the emoji 1 and then select. But I think the easiest shortcut for you is to look at what's here. If you don't need a tree, hover over it and replace it with whatever else you need or might want to use from this template, like this gear symbol. And keep in mind that Adobe Illustrator allows you to use these with full copyright. So you get to own whatever you design with this. You can use it for commercial products. It doesn't matter what you do with this. You can incorporate it into your design however you want. So it's a little known trick that can be very helpful for speeding up your process. And just keep in mind, I've also already added these other essential text symbols for figures, such as the alphas, the betas. These you can't usually easily write yourself in the text. So if I wanted to create a text box, and let's say I was going to have some sort of signaling molecule with the beta, signaling beta, and you want that beta symbol, this is where you can use V to get out of the text box, go in here, copy that B beta text symbol and paste. And this will be something that you want to format in the end with whatever it is you are formatting your whole figure with. So I just changed it all to a regular. You could also go in here and with all of these text symbols, change it to whichever font style you're using for your figure. But it's a really handy way to just have these on hand. And it even is a handy way to use bullet points. There are no bullet points easily accessible in here unless you use these symbols. So again, that's another way, large bullet point, small bullet point, to use copy-paste text symbols from my template provided here. And finally, the last set of illustrations on this template are these complex cellular backgrounds. This includes an example of a notch signaling pathway that provides an example of what you can do with all of the templates provided here. And this shows a nice complex signaling pathway where if I ungroup this, every element was something that I pulled from this template. And you can overwrite this. You can use this however you want. If you have a similar signaling pathway that's not notch, this is now yours if you purchase the product to adjust and use however you want. If you wanted to replace which genes, right, or use the same color scheme for a different signaling pathway that doesn't involve exocytosis or endocytosis, there's some of these really nice formatted cell backgrounds already here for you to use. Now that we've completed the review of how to use the Illustrator file, there are a few more things I want to show you. Starting with the fact that you get this color, but also the grayscale version of the exact same document. So we just reviewed the color file, and as I open up the grayscale file, what you'll see is that this has the exact same artboards and illustrations as the previous file, but they're all in grayscale gradients and colors, which means you may want to choose your color selection without being biased by my previous color. So I just wanted you to have this option where you can still do the exact same process of selecting, ungrouping, and adjusting either the vector points, but using the direct selection tool A, or the selection tool to change the shape and size, and using the eyedropper tool and the color palette provided, you can also be adjusting the color scheme of all the illustrations in this file. So it's again another way to use all of the artwork provided to make your own customized illustrations. You can copy and paste the hex codes, and again, you can use any color scheme you want, and this just allows you to see them all without my pre-selected colors available for you. Now, the final thing I want to show you is that let's say you have this file open or the color file open, and you've been adjusting a bunch of the cells, and you have particular cell types and shapes and colors that you've made and want to keep in your own template file for exporting. And you want to export, let's say, this specific artboard, which used to be the basophil cell artboard number 46. So if we can go over here, you can see this is artboard number 46. If you've changed this and it no longer represents a basophil in your own new template, remember you can double click and edit these artboard names, my custom cell, and let's say you do this to many different files in the folder for your own customized template, and you want to then, maybe you're not as familiar with then making your final files in Illustrator. Maybe you want to export these as PNGs or SVGs to work in a different software, such as Affinity Designer or in Inkscape or in PowerPoint. So what I want to let you know that you can do is, because these are all on individual artboards, you can go to File, Export, Export As, and if you wanted to export this as a PNG file for a PowerPoint presentation or many other file types, a TIFF, an SVG, you can click the Use Artboards button, and you can select either all of the artboards on this file to export as individual files, or you can also select just the files you've updated. So this is number 46. If I just want to export this file as a PNG, I can just select that artboard number, press export, make this a transparent background that will ensure that all I'm exporting is this color cell and no white background, and a high resolution file. And if I go back to my folder, you can see that there's now a new file that has the My Custom Cell export for this individual file. If you open it, you can see that you can then pull this into any other place that you're using it to make your own diagrams. It could be in PowerPoint, is a very valuable way to use this. And if you do this with all your own files and you want to export all of them, keep in mind that's also very easy to do. You can export as, let's say I want these as vector SVG files. I can use artboards, export them all, select my settings, how high the resolution you want to be. 5 is usually good when it's a vector file already. And what you'll see is this is now exporting all of the files in this grayscale file. Let's say you've customized them all yourself. If I go back to my folder, you can see that all of those individual artboards are now available as individual files with names that make pretty common sense as to what they're trying to represent. Again, knowing that you can always change this to represent whatever you want. And you can open them up individually in Illustrator, Adobe, Affinity Designer, or any other vector software. And that's all I had to show you for the biological diagram template review. And I hope that you learned a lot about what you get when you download these files and how to use them for your own custom designs. So thank you for watching and have a great day.